All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So today we are on the free-to-play account, which, for those that don't know, I am doing a free-to-play through. Basically, I start a new account, I spend no money, and I go through the main progression of the game so that I can get a feel for the new player experience, what players have access to, how hard things are to get, any issues people can run into, etc., etc. And today I wanted to talk about some of the weapons that I have built that have been useful to me and that have completed goals and just been good, and the reasons why those weapons are good, and just talk about them and their builds, and just kind of give everybody maybe some goals to go for if you are a new player and are looking for some things that you actually have access to, as opposed to everyone telling you that you should build that MR14 weapon that's very good. So for that, we have a few things to talk about. First and foremost, we're kind of just going to go in order that you can get these things. Rhino. Rhino is the number one. So Rhino, you can farm from Venus, from the Jackal, which if you're a new player, you have either fought him already or you might be stuck on him. And I do have a guide for doing that Jackal fight for new players if you're having trouble with that fight. With that, Rhino, very, very excellent, accessible Warframe with some really simple builds. Now, in this build, we have Steel Charge, which, if you're a new player and you don't know, you can get Steel Charge if you go into the Nightwave. It can be in the credit offerings here. It'll be one of the mods that's available. It's not available this week, but Steel Charge is an excellent one to grab. It is a V polarity, which is a very, very important because that is going to give us the extra points required on Rhino in order to fit this whole build. Now, notably, you really don't need to fit this whole build to get a lot out of Rhino. And Steel Charge's effect, outside of giving you more points to utilize, which is plus 60% melee damage, is extremely, extremely useful for the early game, because the Mark 1 bow extremely early on in the game, which you'll see in that Jackal video, if you go and check that out, is super, super powerful until you get one of the other weapons we're going to talk about. But the baseline with Rhino for where I am right now is basically that I have a lot of efficiency built up between a maxed out Fleeting Expertise, which is the single most important mod in this entire build, allowing me to cast my Iron Skin for significantly cheaper and keep myself alive. That is, of course, combining with this broken copy of Streamline. Now, for anyone that's wondering, I do have a real copy of Streamline, but I have kind of come around on broken Streamline as a decent option, because you'll notice that I'm getting 12% ability efficiency out of this for 5 points. And of course, if I were to only rank up Streamline once, I would be at 10%. And if I would rank it up twice, I'd be at 15%, which is of course better than this broken copy of Streamline. But everybody gets this broken copy of Streamline. Like, you don't have to get it randomly. And this is not so bad. I think of all the flawed mods, this is probably the one that is actually worth leveling, because being at 172 efficiency as compared to being at 175 efficiency is not too big a difference, and you're going to be doing pretty good at 172. The main thing is getting that Fleeting Expertise, but this little bit extra actually really does help. Outside of that, the reason that I have not just leveled this Streamline and thrown it in is because I want to continue to use Thieves' Wit and Mobilize. Mobilize, if you have it, this makes you much faster whenever you're bullet jumping around. And that increased speed is of value to me as someone who's trying to do things quickly. If you don't value that, by all means, throw a Streamline in here that's maxed and get that other little bit of efficiency. That's going to be great. Thieves' Wit is great because this account needs drops. I have a bunch of materials that I don't have enough of. So knowing that those materials are on the map and making sure that I grab them is very important. Thieves' Wit is, of course, helping with that by showing me that they're there. So that is, of course, very powerful. Other things, we have Intensify, not required at all for this, but the extra 30% ability strength is nice for making it so that Iron Skin is just a little bit tougher. But that toughness of the Iron Skin doesn't matter too much, because if it mattered, a whole lot, all you'd really have to do is put Steel Fiber in here and level that instead of Vitality and Redirection, and you'd get considerably more Iron Skin per cast, because Redirection and Vitality really don't do a lot in this build overall. They're just some mods that I had leveled and I kind of just threw them in just because. But if you want your Iron Skin to be really, really strong, Steel Fiber is definitely your friend. However, of course, keep in mind that Vitality and Redirection are going to be more useful on other frames, and you probably, if you started with Mag, are going to have a Redirection, or even if you started with a Volt, you're probably going to have a Redirection that has a good number of levels in it, and there's no real reason not to throw it into Rhino, because he has 2 D polarities to throw it onto. So yeah, this is a build for Rhino that does not use a reactor. I probably actually wouldn't even suggest putting a reactor into regular Rhino, as it's likely just not worth it, because there are going to be other Warframes that are going to want that much, much more, and Rhino functions kind of perfectly fine just with this. He doesn't really need anything else. So this is where I am with Rhino so far. Just a great Warframe, very versatile, very survivable, just gets things done. Now, moving on, we have the Vectus, which is the next point of talking here. So this meets a requirement for us. So on the Saturn junction, or the junction to get off of Saturn, rather, you need to build a weapon of a certain MR requirement. And I don't remember if it's MR1 or MR2. Either way, the Vectus fulfills that requirement, and it fulfills it very cheaply. It costs a few neurodes, but the Vectus is a solid weapon, specifically for, actually, dealing with the boss on Saturn, which is Sargus Ruck. Now, if you go and get this weapon first, this will also very much deal with Sargus Ruck. But if you don't, which I think is going to be the likely case for most people, you are going to probably want to grab the Vectus for a number of different reasons. Number one, it's a sniper rifle, so this is going to be a useful thing to bring into sorties later on, whenever you have sniper-only sorties and such. And in addition to that, it can be built very, very cheaply. Obviously, we have just, a rank 4 Serration here. We have a critical delay, a vital sense, and then a Hellfire that has a couple of ranks in it. Now, there's a bunch of things that you can change on this build that are going to shift things one way or another. First and foremost, critical delay. So this is plus 200% critical chance, minus 20% fire rate. This is a corrupted mod. It comes from the same place that Fleeting Expertise does, in the Dragon Vaults. And I would very much suggest any new player farm there, because there's a ton of hyper impactful mods there. However, you really don't need critical delay. You very likely have a point strike, and this is going to get you most of the way there. On the Vectus, it's not going to matter too much whether you're using critical delay or point strike. I think critical delay edges it out, and they cost the same when they're both maxed out. So I would generally lean this way if you have it, but if you don't, not a big deal to use point strike. Now, if you have the 60/60 dual stat mod for your heat mod, you should definitely use that over Hellfire, because right here we have this 8-cost Hellfire mod that's giving me 45% heat. However, the maxed out dual stat 60/60 mod costs 7 and gives me 60% heat and 60% status. And the 60% status can actually kind of matter, because we are building this into only heat, and heat is an incredibly good elemental. So if we're going to be proccing that, especially with a weapon like the Vectus, that's going to deal a significant amount of damage over time, which is very nice. Also, in addition to that, because we would save 1 point here, you would actually be able to put 2 additional ranks into Serration for a pretty considerable bump in damage. And this weapon is also not utilizing an Orokin Catalyst. So we don't have any extra points here. This is just kind of baseline what this can fit. And this weapon will actually get a lot done. You can do a considerable amount of damage with this, because it also has the scaling that snipers have. Basically, the more shots that you hit and don't miss while you're zoomed in, you get more and more damage as that goes up. And also, of course, you get the zoom in bonuses for headshot damage and everything else. So that stuff all really kind of compounds together to make this a really budget-friendly weapon that just does a whole lot with very, very little, much like Rhino does. And that trend is going to continue. So we have the Zorus. So the Zorus you can get at MR4 as long as you have completed the Fortuna intro quest, which by the time you're MR4, you should be pretty capable of doing, as that quest isn't too difficult. But that will unlock the Deadlock Protocol. The Deadlock Protocol is an excellent quest that gives you the Zorus along the way. It's just part of the story of the quest. You're going to get the parts of the Zorus and put the Zorus together. The Zorus is the #1 most worth it to invest in item for any new player. And I mean any. If you hate glaives, that's fine. If you decide that you just don't like how this weapon works, that's fine. You're probably still going to want to have it as just a tool, as a bottle opener for situations that you don't quite have a handle on yet. Like, you can go in and just utilize the Vectus a lot more if you just enjoy that. But you're going to want to have the Zorus for problems. The Zorus is really, really easy to put together. Now, I'm going to talk about getting these mods and how just simple it is, first and foremost. But this is the first weapon that I put an Orokin Catalyst into, and it is extremely, extremely worth it for more reasons than I could even probably list within the span of this video, because it is just excellent for so many different tasks that you're going to run into. Now, this build, very, very simple. Obviously, no form are required. We have a pressure point, super simple to get. You're definitely going to have this. Northwind, you definitely have this because you're going to have to go through a junction that gives you this. Killing Blow, very, very common. If you don't have this, this is a mod that I would just suggest that you ask someone for. True Steel and Organ Shatter. So notably, actually on this free-to-play through, I did not have a True Steel, and I did have to trade for it. So if you, for some reason, like me, didn't have one of these, definitely trade for it. Obviously, I've gotten drops for it since then. But yeah, if you're missing Organ Shatter or True Steel, these are common nothingness. Just trade for them. And then Fever Strike, also not very particularly hard to get. And the elemental of this weapon doesn't matter too much. So if you just have whatever other elemental in here, you're going to be fine. Now, the two difficult to acquire mods are Corrupt Charge, which is plus 30 initial combo, minus 50% combo duration, which the negative doesn't do anything because this weapon has infinite combo duration, number one. But number two, that plus 30 initial combo means that you are going to be at a 2x multiplier always on the Zorus. And what that does for you is it has a huge increase to your heavy attack damage, much like Killing Blow does. So you're going to do a ton of heavy attack damage, and Killing Blow is also going to speed up the rate at which you can do those heavy attacks. That is going to combine with Volatile Quick Return. Now, Volatile Quick Return comes from Deimos, but this mod is very common. I would say it's relatively likely that you could ask somebody for a Volatile Quick Return, and you'd get it. But if you have to go to Deimos and farm this, it's not a big deal. Also, this weapon works perfectly fine without it. But definitely the increased blast radius is very, very helpful on this mod. And the minus bounce I also like personally. Now, as for the stance, Astral Twilight. Now, some people are going to think Astral Twilight is maybe kind of rare, but it is not at all. There are tons and tons of players that farm the Kuva Siphons for one reason or another. And whenever you farm those Kuva Siphons, the enemies just drop so many Astral Twilights. It is not going to be uncommon for you to find players that just have hundreds of Astral Twilights just sitting around doing nothing in their inventory. This mod, I know it's labeled as a rare, but really realistically, it is so easy to get. I would just ask somebody for one. And honestly, if you can get any of the glaive stances, which one you get doesn't really matter. All that's actually going to matter here is the additional 10 points this is going to give you in terms of your capacity. Although, I will say, I do also like Astral Twilight's combos if you're going to be using those. So yeah, overall, this is great, and there are a few upgrades to it. Obviously, you get a mod called Sacrificial Steel whenever you get into the Sacrifice quest, and that is a mod that replaces True Steel. So I haven't done this yet on this free-to-play through account, but I just want to talk about the upgrade path for this account. And that upgrade path involves going to get the dual stat mods that replace Northwind and Fever Strike. Because when you do that, you go down to 7 cost for each of these mods, and you get 60% damage each. So you lose 30% elemental damage, but you gain 120% status chance, which is nice. And in trade, you get back 4 points from your cold weapon slot and 2 points from your toxin weapon slot as it stands right now. So that's 6 points total. And Sacrificial Steel is a max out at a 16 cost mod. So you are going to be able to put it in instead of True Steel if it is rank 9 or below. And as a new player, you should not be putting any mod to rank 10, let alone a mod of as high a rarity as Sacrificial Steel. So it's very likely that you're only going to take it to 8. So just getting those other 2 mods to replace these 2 and slotting in Sacrificial Steel is going to increase the power of this build exponentially. And just be a really excellent upgrade path for this weapon. And that is what I personally am planning to do with the Zorus going forward. Now, with that, after the Zorus, you do have another requirement to hit, and that is that you have to build a weapon that requires MR5 or above. And for that, I have found no better weapon than the Atomos. The Atomos is the OG. It's the original of what all of kind of the best secondaries in the game are built off of. Because it chains damage between enemies, and it's a beam weapon that does heat damage. So, with all that, you basically just end up with this build. Now, to talk about this a little bit, Creeping Bullseye, this is once again one of the corrupted mods. If you don't have this, you're going to be very well off with just using a Pistol Gambit here. It's not going to change things too much at all. Just use this instead if you don't have a Creeping Bullseye, though I do lean on Creeping Bullseye as a better overall mod than Pistol Gambit if you do have it. Other things of note here, Barrel Diffusion and Lethal Torrent can be a little challenging to get. Now, for barrel diffusion, this is a mod I would say you can just ask for. People just have hundreds of them sitting around. Not a big deal. The friendly Warframe community is very likely to just give you a barrel diffusion. Very baseline mod that everybody should have access to, especially with everyone upgrading to galvanized diffusion, which we'll get into a bit later in the free-to-play through. So, with that, let's talk about Lethal Torrent. So Lethal Torrent is a nightmare mod, and it is honestly a nightmare to farm, because you can only do nightmare missions once every 8 hours, which means you get a limited amount of chances at this per day, basically. And for most people, it's going to be a once per day shot at getting this mod. But it is absolutely incredibly hyper important to acquire. And what I would suggest is that you clear out Uranus and Neptune in terms of completing all the nodes on those two planets, and then just hit those nightmare missions up trying to get Lethal Torrent. I did trade for Lethal Torrent. I bought it from another player with some platinum that I had farmed. But I wouldn't suggest that for most people, because I was just trying to get this Thomas build up to snuff. For most people, I would just suggest, like, over time, just like make sure you hit those nightmare missions every day and try and get this mod. Also, worth noting as a longer term thing, because Lethal Torrent is so important and it is actually quite rare, it's actually pretty good value to keep doing those nightmare missions even after you get this, because you can sell additional copies of this, and you can sell additional copies of Blaze, which I believe is like a fucking 50 platinum mod or some outrageous price, even on PC. So definitely worth doing that, especially when the missions are really fast, because it's just a high value thing for you to acquire that you can just, sell very easily, because it's a thing that everybody needs. Notable upgrades for this build: you can replace Heated Charge with Scorch, and that does a ton for this build, because you lose 4 cost of the mod here, and you go down to 60% heat damage, but you gain 60% status, which matters for this weapon because it is a pure heat weapon, and the more heat that you proc, the more damage that you do, which is super powerful. And getting those 4 points back actually allows you to go in and put an additional 5 points into Hornet Strike overall. Obviously, I have 1 extra capacity right now, so I can put 1 more point in. But I could take this all the way to rank 9 if I were to switch to Scorch, which is a gigantic damage increase. Now, for most players, I really wouldn't suggest you take Hornet Strike past rank 8 kind of ever, especially with some of the upgrades we're going to be getting into very late game. But really worthwhile to note that, like, going up to rank 8, super feasible with this, and it's going to make it a whole lot better. Now, I also have a Slive Alphaphylla. Now, Slive Alphaphylla are incredible. I would say this is the second best companion in the whole game, right behind the Panzer Alphaphylla. And they are excellent for a number of different reasons, and the main one of which is that they're just busted. They're just honestly, they're just busted. I have no reactor in this at all, and it kind of is doing, let's say, 80% of what it needs to do, and that is Survival Instinct, which is that increases, Slide Devolution, devolves into its larval form upon death, increasing its master's evasion. That part doesn't really matter. You can level that if you want to. But it respawns into its true form after 30 seconds, and that's the really important part, is that this companion can't die. If it dies, it just comes right back. And that is absolutely excellent. We also have Survival Instinct, which is that, whenever you're getting kills and stuff, you're getting some evasion chance, which is going to help you avoid damage and keep you alive, which is great. And in addition to that, you can equip Fetch on this. If you don't have a copy of Fetch, this is another one where it's pretty easy to get, and if you really are just like hard up for one, just ask somebody for one, and I'm sure they'll give you a copy of Fetch if you don't have it. Then other than that, we just have Sharpened Claws maxed out, and Sharpened Claws is actually one of the additional functions that you can put on here. It's a Kavat mod that also goes on the Vulpas. And this sunders armor by 120% and rends flesh. So this is an armor stripper. So basically your companion is going to sometimes just completely remove the armor of your enemies, which is going to make them way easier to kill, which is, of course, very, very nice. Other than that, I do have a couple levels into a Vitality on here, just to make it so that they go into their devolution less often, because, of course, you do want them to be doing a little Sharpened Claws and things like that. And then I've also just thrown in some free mods like Scavenge, just to have on here. Now, I will be putting into this Animal Instinct whenever I get it, and that is going to take up 11 of my remaining 13 capacity. So I definitely am going to shoot for that. And then probably from there, for this completely ungilded, unformed, just like hyper baseline of Alphaphylla, I'll probably put Enhanced Vitality up to rank 8 and pretty much call it good there. that's going to be a companion that's better than pretty much anything else that you can get until you start gilding your Alphaphylla, and then you can put the rest of the stuff in them. Worth noting, when you guild your Alphaphylla, if you have a D polarity from whenever you created your Alphaphylla, and just so it's clear, this Alphaphylla is an Adra mutagen and the Desis antigen, which are the easiest ones to acquire on Deimos. You can get them super, super early, and the Slive Alphaphylla is the most common Vulpa on Deimos, so super easy to acquire, very, very simple. This mutagen and this antigen are going to give you the results that you're probably looking for. That's going to give you this D polarity here, which is, of course, very useful for one survivability mod. Whenever you guild the Alphaphylla, you want to put a dash polarity in them, and that's going to be for Animal Instinct and, much further down the line, Primed Animal Instinct, because that mod is going to go into pretty much every companion once you get it. And with that, you'll never need to forma any Alphaphylla, because they have fully functional builds with no forma just after being gilded and being given a reactor. So yeah, great stuff with the Alphaphylla, pretty much like where I want to be at with the companions. Now then, I just want to kind of show off these weapons a little bit and how they work for anybody who doesn't know. Glaives can be particularly confusing. I had a lot of people look at the Zorus and be like, this weapon was really terrible for me. I don't understand how to use it. So we're going to go over how to use the Zorus properly, and also I'm going to show off the Atamos and like a little bit of the Vectus and stuff, so you can kind of get a feel for what these weapons are like. And we're just going through some like Sedna star chart clearing, not sorties or anything like that, but the Zorus can very easily handle sorties. I think that'll be apparent once we start using it. And the Atamos, I'm actually not sure if it's quite there. It might need the Scorch upgrade to really feel comfortable in sorties, but in general, doing very solid, especially in these star chart levels. Yeah, so it's first and foremost the Atamos. It chains between enemies and it burns them alive. That's very good. Who knew? Turns out that's super solid. You saw the Avalpa armor strip that enemy there, which is, of course, also very nice. Didn't really need to. Of course, it's just a weaker enemy, but on larger boss targets, which it also works on, it can be super, super effective. But yeah, you can see the Atamos, even on like the final planet of the star chart, doing a good job of just burning down these armored enemies very, very easily, and this is without the Scorch upgrade. So yeah, good stuff there. Like, just not a big deal for the Atamos to be able to take down these enemies. So in the case that the Zorus like got changed somehow, or like they ruined Glaives again, the Atamos is very likely to still be a fantastic option, even if you're coming to this video much later. Moving on, let's throw the Zorus at something. So the Zorus' whole thing is that it is a Glaive, and obviously you can just do regular combos with it, and that's all fine and good. But what you want to do is that you want to blow everybody up. The way that you do that is you hold the attack button, and that'll allow you to throw. And with Volatile on, it does that little bit of damage, which is still enough to kill that guy, just, dealing 7,000 damage to him. Just like throwing it and letting it hit something will have it blow up, and it'll do a little bit. However, if you want to do a lot of it, you will throw it, and while it is in midair, you hit the heavy attack button. The heavy attack button is by default middle mouse click. I would highly advise you rebind that to something that's a little bit more convenient. But whenever you do that explosion, this build is centered around doing heavy attacks with the Zorus, and you're going to get some very, very high numbers. Don't be surprised if you see numbers that are up in like 500,000s, or even like in the millions, depending on who's in your party. If there's a Nova around, definitely expect to see like millions of damage pop up on screen. It's really, really strong. It is absolutely excellent. It is the bottle opener. It is the crowbar of the early game. It is absolutely phenomenal in terms of performance. Now, for the Vectus, obviously this is a bit of an earlier thing. This is going to perform a little bit worse. Like you can see, like the damage numbers here, they're totally workable. And this is, of course, without the upgraded to the Elemental on here as well, so it's much weaker than it would otherwise be. But it does a good amount. Like, it can hit weak points. Like, you're going to get that extra headshot damage. And, like, the more you combo up, the more you're going to also get that additional damage and just, move up on through. Obviously, not critting is not great. You can see there that the enemy survives when I don't crit. But not critting is also fairly unlikely. But yeah, that's kind of where we are with the stuff here. You can see Rhino doing a very good job of just, like, eating these bullets, being able to reapply the iron skin off cooldown, even against, like, having the Nox here, shooting the poison at me. Not really a huge deal at all. Just good stuff in general. Being able to throw the Zorus in the middle of rooms and have it blow up and kill the mans, as it were. And in this mission, of course, Rhino, very useful, just being able to go in here. Just get this done very quickly in terms of this rescue. Oh, and you know what? I did not actually show this Rhino build, did I? I'll make sure and show that after the mission so that everybody can see that. The Rhino build, not... Oh, no, we did go over the Rhino build. Sorry about that. Yeah, the Rhino build, not anything too fancy, but it does what it's supposed to do. Rhino build does what it's supposed to do. It puts Iron Skin on, and that's really all there is to it. Get this in here. We're just getting some clear on the star chart. We are going to be doing sorties and stuff, and I don't predict that I'm going to have any trouble doing any sorties with the Zorus. Obviously, weapon-only sorties are going to be the biggest point of contention, but we're going to be looking to solve that problem pretty swiftly here with some upgrades that we are currently working on the free-to-play through for anyone who's interested. We are currently building Ivara Prime and Zephyr Prime, because today was the release of Nidus Prime Access, and we farmed a bit of that and sold a bit of that. So now we have some platinum to work with. And I decided to go with Zephyr because, one, she also got buffed today, and two, she's also just a good choice for Steel Path. And she has some interesting abilities to farm that other frames don't quite have access to. And then Ivara is for a few different things. Ivara Prime is going to help us with conservation, which is going to help us a lot with the open worlds. And then in addition to that, we are going to have her for syndicate farming, for Simaris, and also like potential focus farm with her as well through Adaro. I have not actually tried the Adaro focus farm with a Zorus and a Navara, but it's a thing that I'm definitely curious about to see if we can't get these Xeneric numbers up and start getting that energy generation that we so desire. Yeah, that's kind of a general update on where the free-to-play through is at, why it's been where it's been, and maybe hopefully some goals if you are a newer player to the game. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video, and yeah, the things are moving on through in the free-to-play. Been a good time, and there will be some updated builds coming for the kind of like, you know, other more high-end things from the main account very soon here. So yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow.